Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. You know about the bottom line. Today you'll learn about the double bottom line from our guest, Donato Tramuto. Donato, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
Can you explain the title of your book, The Double Bottom Line? What does that really mean? Because that's new to all of us.
Well, it's a great first question. The workplace and the world have changed. And, I started this notion of looking at things differently about 10 years ago. And what I really observed is that employees, consumers, stakeholders are now demanding that companies take care of their people, their communities, and the world around them. My gosh, we've heard this term, the Great Resignation, but I call it the Great Reflection. People are reflecting on their lives, and the expectation and the leadership imperative for companies from the employees is to focus on their people as much as on their bottom line. And I believe, listen, I was CEO of a public company. I was CEO of private companies, and I did both. And it actually strengthened my bottom line, and it delivered better results while also delivering better conditions for my people. So that's the double bottom line.
In effect, focusing on the people involved.
Exactly. And doing more than just focusing, you really have to care about your people. And this is why we interviewed over 41 world leaders, and we also did a survey of 1,500 employees to really extract the definition of compassionate leadership.
How did the pandemic, if it did, affect this, the ideas brought out in your book and the production of this book?
Wow, it's a great question. And remember, I had conceived this concept of writing a second book. I released my first book in 2016. And it was about a year after I had introduced the first book that I started to have this feeling that we were having a deterioration of kindness and compassion, both in this country and across the world. And the pandemic really put it on steroids. And you could start to see the leaders who were succeeding were leaders that truly understood the notion of putting their people first. And so I want to be clear that, the book wasn't developed as a result of the pandemic. Long before the pandemic, we started to see a deterioration, if you will, in the trust that employees had in their leadership.
And it's good we have someone like you out there seeing that and kind of alerting us to it, because that's where we're going into the future, obviously. Now, how about the fact that in a workplace today, we have 5 or maybe even more generations, and we have all these people with nice names: baby boomers, millennials, Gen X, Gen Y. I don't think most of us, we keep hearing them. We hear about the most current ones, but they all have to work together, and their views are pretty different. How does that affect everything?
Gosh, I am so happy that you surfaced this question. Listen, there is a generational shift taking place in the workplace, from one that is baby boomer centric to one that is made up of millennials and Gen Zers. By the way, the latter will make up more than 2/3 of the workforce by 2030, and they already account for more than half of our workforce today. But the question I ask right now, are leaders and managers ready for the future workforce? I believe in too many cases the answer is no. Let me give you one case example. The average age of the CEO in the United States is 59. By the way, that's the average age of our elected political leaders in Washington. And most senior leaders in C-suite positions who are in their late 50s tend to hire their executive team in the same likeness. And that is an enormous mistake. First of all, you're not getting the kind of input, the kind of diversity, the kind of different thinking by having everyone on your executive team who looks and perhaps in many respects is near or similar to your age. And so this is what we encourage, that many of the people that are coming into the workforce, they want more flexibility, They want their leaders to be authentic. They want to be a part of something bigger. They want to belong to a community, and they want their leaders to care about their well-being. But if you don't have your executive team representative of that generational difference, you're never going to address those venues that I just described.
That's a great point. And obviously, we've been on over 33 years. This is something more recent. But even in our recent guests, I don't recall anyone bringing that out, that we all tend to like people like ourselves. And if you're 28, you probably like to have people from 25 to 35 around you. They share the same likes, enjoyments, and both at work and recreational. And of course, the same thing for older people. And what you're saying makes so much sense, because if our workforce is diverse, and if it's a larger company with people from all age groups, which most are, we really have to take a serious look at that, because we could be falling into a trap we don't even realize.
Well, and that's a very good point. And let me just kind of take that one step further. Many older workers are frustrated by younger workers, and they even display a conscious or unconscious bias toward them, assuming that they are lazy or entitled. For leaders who are from earlier generations to effectively manage the current and future workforce, they need some new essential skills and a new mindset. And I think one of those important mindsets is to listen to understand. I talk about this in the book. Don't listen to react. And when you look at somebody that might be 30, 40 years younger than you, your tendency is to react and say, they're young, they're right out of college, they don't know what they're talking about. I want to share with the listeners here today how I have lived by example. I just hired a new manager for our foundation and also for the promotion of the book. She is 23 years old, graduated from college last year. Normally, I would have hired somebody in their 40s and 50s. Let me tell you this, that would have been a big mistake. This individual has brought so many new ideas and new innovations around how to promote the book. And so I'm not saying that you dismiss anyone in your age group. What I'm saying is you include multiple age diversity and segments in that executive team.
Donato, I want you to know you're making me work hard, because as you're talking, I'm writing all this down, and I've already heard what I think could be titles for your next books. But you said, don't listen to react, listen to understand. Wow, if we just did that, that could be as a good sermon for virtually every pastor in church next week, or wherever they're given sermons or lectures. If all of us did that, wouldn't we have a much more peaceful world? And what you said makes so much sense. You want to sell your book. You want to get your book out there. You're a certain age group. Why not have someone working with you from another age group so you can get a different perspective? And again, it's going to be success for both of you if it works. So why not do that? Why just fall into that old trap that we have to have someone of our own, similar likenesses, whether it's the same ball team or same size or same age?
Well, let me share with you a wonderful story. Every time I have dinner at my home, I will normally ask a question of the dinner guest. And a few months ago, the question that I asked, which famous person would you have wanted to live in their shoes? And I wanted them to explain why. Somebody gave a political name, and 3 people at the table reacted. They didn't listen to the why. And that's what I think is wrong. By the way, this is not a business book. This book is for all walks of life. I think families will learn from it. I think families will begin to take a moment and have a conversation. We're having too many versations. We're not listening to the other side. And I think that is one of the key nuggets I truly believe is coming out of this book in terms of people really understanding how they can change.
I enjoy questions that make us all think. I go for a lot of walks. When I'm out there, I pretend I'm in a classroom and either the teacher or the student trying to answer a question. And that's one that's going to be the topic on my mind tomorrow. Which person would you want to be and live in their shoes? And of course, we have to think the good and the bad. We always take somebody, a rich ball player, a famous, handsome actor, or a rock star, and maybe in your case, the politician. But it does make you think, and it makes you think of the good and bad that comes with every position. And we might come right back to ourselves and say, I think I'll stay with who I am. It's not worth all of the changes. Donato, at this point in the show, I want to remind our audience that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Donato Tramuto. He is the author of The Double Bottom Line. And Donato, we're going to ask you where we can get the book and if there's a website where we can learn more.
The name of that website is donatotramuto.com.
And where can we get the book?
You could go on Amazon. The book, is available on Amazon and any of the bookstores. It's available at airports right now, so it's widely distributed.
You've given us a lot of great ideas already. Let me ask you, are there some companies that you would hold up as a model and we should look up to and maybe learn more about, that you would say, this is the kind of company that's doing this today, that's aware of the double bottom line?
Howard Schultz. I know Howard Schultz from Starbucks. He and I were recipients of the Robert F. Kennedy Ripple of Hope Award. What he is doing right now in his third CEO stint is exactly what I talk about in the book. He's not making any major decisions right now. He's going around and listening to his employees. Now, it takes longer to do that, but I introduce a concept that I think Howard is practicing, and it's called the 3 T's. Tenderness first to get the trust, and then you can be tenacious. Too many leaders are tenacious first, and then they have to go around with a pooper scooper to get the trust. And I think Howard Schultz is an example. He is saying, wait a second, I need to understand what's changed in the last 4 or 5 years since I've been out of my CEO role. And I think that's brilliant. Too many of our shareholders and Wall Street will pressure you for a quick decision and a quick strategy. That will get you in trouble. And I think that Howard Schultz is exemplifying exactly how we explain the 3 T's and how we explain to listen to understand as opposed to listening to react.
Now, essentially, he would be exhibiting compassionate leadership, but don't a lot of people, we hear the old stories about the boss came in and everybody kind of sat up, and if the boss said this or that or the other thing, that's the way you did it, even if it didn't make sense or if you didn't like it, etc. And maybe sometime it was downright outrageous. Isn't this somewhat of a sign of weakness, or will it be taken that way? Or are the younger groups that are coming up looking for this and accepting it?
Not at all. And, listen, for many, many years, when I explained my approach to leadership, namely that I was a compassionate leader, someone, accused me of weak leadership. This could not be further from the truth. Compassionate leaders do tough work, like addressing conflict to create stronger teams, or letting people go when they are toxic to the company culture. A few months ago, I was walking in my town where I have my summer home, and I didn't recognize this person who yelled out my name, "Hey, Donato." And I looked at them, I said, "I don't know you." They said, "Well, you fired me when you were at United Healthcare." And I thought, oh my God, this is not going to be a great moment. And then the person looked at me and said, no. You did it with the utmost respect, and you helped me transition to another profession. That is compassionate leadership. You have to make the tough decisions, but you can either do it with tenacity or you can practice the 3 T's, and that is to do it with tenderness, to get the trust, and then make that tough decision.
I have to say that's one of those sayings and short anecdotes that really is an awesome compliment, because when you can get someone who you fired or let go, to be nice, who comes back and thanks you for the help you gave and helping them transition to something which apparently they are happier with and is more fitting for their outlook and personality, etc. That's an awesome compliment. That's one of those things. It's like the quote you put on the wall that keeps you going every day.
Well, the other myth that I want to dispel is that compassion is the same as being nice. Nice might mean being pleasant, smiling, how are you? That's not the same as compassionate leadership. Compassionate leadership is going beyond that. It's asking the question to which you are not afraid to receive the answer. Case in point, about a year and a half, no, 2.5 years ago, we had an elevator in our company that was reserved for the CEO, and I never took it. The only time I would take it if I might be on an analyst call and I couldn't have other people listen in. But I normally took the employee elevator. And one day this employee got on it. I didn't just ask how, how are you? I went a little bit deeper. I asked the person to tell me, what are you experiencing at this moment? And the employee started to cry. He told me that he lost the majority of his family 2 days ago, prior to that time, in Iraq. I brought him to my office. We started to talk about things that we could do. We raised money. We allowed him to go back home. His mother had survived the, unspeakable tragedy. That's what compassionate leadership is. It's empathy in action. It's not just empathy.
That's amazing, and I thought that you would certainly not top the story you told me a few seconds ago, but that one does, because first of all, if I was in the elevator with the CEO, I would assume he doesn't want to talk to me, and no matter, even if I have a fairly high position in there, he must have other things on his mind, or she must, and the fact that you address them, first of all, and talk to them, certainly showed how much you reached out and actually practiced what you're preaching in this book. And then to hit on an employee like this, where you could really do a lot of good for one of your own employees, not only was it a great charitable act, but I'm sure word got around the company of the way people are treated.
Well, I thank you for that. And one of the most encouraging takeaways from the book, as I was completing the interviews of the 41 leaders and the survey, I looked back at my own professional life. And the majority of the times I did practice compassionate leadership. And that's one of the things that we uncovered, is that you can teach it. And it's why I wrote the book, is to provide a playbook that will show leaders how they can be more compassionate. And so I was really thankful that the majority of the time I did use compassionate leadership, and I'm sure that I made mistakes and not afraid to admit that I did make plenty of mistakes, but I learned from them.
I'm just thinking, what a great, if our listeners take nothing else from the story today, if you're the principal of the school or the foreman or the supervisor, and maybe you don't get a chance to talk to your workers much, maybe just take one opportunity a week, and we'll call it the elevator option based on your story, to get to know somebody, what's happening in their life. Did their child just win the soccer tournament, or get a college scholarship, or did they come down with some illness, or how is the person's spouse, the wife or the husband, what's doing in their family. What an image this would portray for the company, and also make you more aware if that person really requires to maybe take a day off or leave a little earlier for a medical appointment or something. You obviously would know it's true, and it wouldn't be a case of where people are frowning on it, etc., or think they're kind of pushing the envelope a bit. What are some of the other myths of compassionate leadership?
Well, I think I gave the majority of them, but I do want to add to what you just said, is that too much of what is going wrong in our country and our world is that we spend too much time on what is different about us. If you take the time to ask people about their stories, you learn, oh my gosh, that person is struggling with cancer and so am I. Or gosh, I didn't realize that the mother lost a son. Well, my mother lost a son. You begin to really extract out what is really common about us. And I think that that's what's really failing us in our society, is that we jump to these conclusions about people without taking the time to really learn their story. I shared with you my story. I lost my hearing at age 8. For 10 years, I was bullied and made fun of. I couldn't speak. And it was a tough time for me. And for years, I didn't share that story with anyone. And I realized the moment that I shared the story with my employees, they realized that I was just like them. And so one of the aspects of compassionate leadership is to be willing to be authentic and vulnerable. And the more you are vulnerable, the greater the relationship equity you will have with your employees.
Once again, you've got me writing it authentic and vulnerable. So you've got me messing up my papers here, but we've got an important message, and I want to remember all of this after the show. Donato, once again, at this point, I want to remind our listeners, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Donato Tramuto. He is the author of The Double Bottom Line, and you're hearing the stories already, and I think they're making an impression on you. They're certainly making an impression on me. Donato, where can we get the book, and is there a website where we can learn more?
Absolutely, and I really appreciate you asking that question, because we do not see the book as just a book. It's a movement, and so we have created a website, donatotramuto.com. You can order the book off the website. You can go to Amazon. On the website, we have articles, we have our podcast. There's numerous resources and materials. I'm also pleased to share with you, Bill, that Boston University School of Public Health is going to develop a executive curriculum on the book. And so stay tuned. We look forward to introducing that in 2023, where executives can take a course and they can take it online and they can get a certificate for it.
And by the way, I'm just thinking, I think if we all had to check a box, wouldn't we like a boss like you or a CEO, even if you weren't our immediate boss, but a few levels up, wouldn't we like to know there's someone like you running the company? I think the answer would be yes. Well, on that same note, in order to make that happen around the world, anybody we're bossing around or have control over or authority over, could we be a little more like the stories you're saying, and just take a few minutes to sincerely ask somebody how their family life is, what's happening at their position, what's new and what's going on with them, and obviously really care. I think that would make such an impression, and I certainly would be more dynamic for a boss like that than the boss who just kind of smiles, nods, and gets off the elevator. Now, I have to ask you a question. You have in the book something about daring to be a little weird. What does that mean?
Well, quite frankly, I think that for years, people said, you're different, you don't fit in. And I'll tell you, I felt a little bit slighted by that. Then I realized, wait a second, when you're weird, you're different. You're willing to take risks. You're willing to do things that other people are not willing to do. And, for example, I had every week in my organization, I had a call that was a Ask Me Anything call. I had so many of my executives who said, this is not a good idea. People are going to call in. They're going to ask things that are not. I said, that is great. That's being weird. That's not following the status quo. You know what? That weekly call became the best decision I ever made. People called in, they knew the good, the bad, the not so good in the company, and we had transparency. And so to those who are listening to this, don't be afraid to be weird, to try things that other people might tell you just will not work. When they tell me it won't work, I do it.
Was this workers who called in, or are you talking about customers for a retail store?
No. These would be the employees.
The employees
would call in. So the day before, I would send out an email of the things that happened that week in the company. And then the next day, we had an Ask Me Anything call. You didn't have to give your name. You could call in. That particular call was attended by more than 80% of the people in the company.
Wow. And you never got burned on someone saying, why did you fire my friend Fred or Shirley?
Of course, those questions came up. And you know what? We were very direct. We didn't get into personnel matters. However, there were times, when the stock dropped, 20% and, it was uncomfortable to get a question, that attacked, perhaps maybe the decisions we made. However, what we were able to do, and I talk a lot about this in the book, there's an old saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Throw that out. Trust eats culture and strategy for breakfast. You have got to get the trust. And by having calls like that, and by being transparent, we were able to gain greater trust and confidence from the employees.
You've got me again busy. My papers are a mess writing down everything that you're saying, and I hope our audience is doing the same thing. But if they're saying, gee, he's going too fast or I can't get all this, a podcast of the show is always on nccradio.org. Just go to Secrets of Success and podcasts and scroll down for the double bottom line. And you can get these comments just as I'm doing. And think what a nice world it would be to work in a company where you can ask the boss anything you want. And occasionally he may talk to you on the elevator or in the parking lot or maybe in the cafeteria. Wouldn't you like that more than perhaps the situation that's going on now? Donato, one of the things I said I was going to ask you before the show, because in your book you have something about getting rid of the seagull method. Tell me where do we use the seagull method and how do we get rid of it?
The seagull,
model, I guess.
The seagull way of managing in the past is that you fly in, you dump, and you leave. That doesn't work anymore. I love the African proverb, quote, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. The kind of leadership that is critical today is one that is sustainable, not one that is you fly in, dump, and leave. And my leadership approach, it took longer perhaps to get the kind of, results that I wanted, but the results were sustainable. The results stayed. I'll give you a great case example. When I became the CEO of Healthways, we had two divisions. One division that was making a lot of money. The other division was losing a lot of money. When you added it together, I was born at night, but not last night. We were not profitable. And so everybody wanted me to shut down the other division that wasn't making money. You know what I did? I went out and listened to the employees for 6 months, and I did something that I don't think has ever been done. I couldn't sell that division, so I gave it away. I paid a company $25 million to take that division, and that idea came from listening to the employees. And guess what? When I made the announcement on Wall Street, I was so afraid that they were going to really injure the stock. The stock went up 40% and went up about 300% a year and a half later. And so sustainable results can be maintained. They can be delivered. However, you're going to have to do it in a way that involves your employees and involves the insights from many people. You can't go it alone.
Donato, I'm sure our audience has been like myself. I've taken more notes on this show than I think I've taken on 95% of our other shows. And we always have great guests, Ivy League professors, world-famous speakers. So you've really given us something to work with. I love it. And I wrote down your last statement. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. I think we should all remember that. Before we wrap up, once again, give us that website. DonatoTramuto.com. And Donato has been our guest today. Tramuto is spelled Tramuto. And I want to thank you for being with us and inspiring us with the information you've given us. You've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.